It looks like it's over, and there's going to be a lot of excuses. And I said this the other day with the whole Kyrie Irving thing. Last week, Kyrie Irving was so happy about moving in and getting a chance to play in the NBA Finals for the first time in a very, very long time since he's won an NBA championship with the Cavaliers. And then, what was it? Game number 2, it was Kyrie Irving complaining, pointing fingers at Luka Doncic that he needs to play better. I don't know why. Luka averaged 30 and 10 for the last 2 games. So I don't blame Luka Doncic. And then you were hearing stories that Luka was getting steroid, whatever he was getting, painkillers, shots in his chest. That's not an excuse. There's always an excuse with these NBA players. You're always trying to find something to point fingers at. Right now, if you look at what the Celtics have done to the Dallas Mavericks, was just absolutely obliterated them. They have dominated them on the boards. When they get the lead, when the Mavericks were up early in the first quarter, they were up by like 9 or 10 points. And what happens? The Celtics come roaring back, and it wasn't with Porzingis. It's really, and Jason Tatum hasn't had a good series. It's really Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, and all these secondary players. It hasn't really been their 2 stars. Porzingis, who was playing very, very well in the first 2 games, he's injured. And Jason Tatum really has not done really as much as you would expect their superstar player to do in the finals. But right now, it's really, they're getting out-coached. I would have never thought that. Jason Kidd is getting out-coached right now. Their team, their secondary players, the Dallas Mavericks secondary players, the guys that we were watching over the last couple of weeks play with Washington and Gafford, none of these guys are doing anything in this series. They're getting absolutely dominated by the Boston Celtics. And I don't really care what Skip Bayless has said, because Skip is going to say anything that's going to contradict everybody else. That's what Skip Bayless does. Yeah. He likes to point fingers. He likes to blame people. This is what he does. This is how he sells his books. This is how he sells his product. And Keyshawn Johnson, please, don't speak about IQs, because your IQ as a football player wasn't damn good either. All right? I remember you as a Jet calling Wayne Corbett a flashlight, all right? And then you go over there to Tampa. Of course, you went to a good team, and you won a Super Bowl. Good for you.
It's a horrible offense, though.
And Stephen A. Smith, who wants to say that Luka should be drawing accountability and not pointing fingers to his teammates. This is the same Stephen A. Smith that said Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are the 2 better players in this series against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. He said these 2 guys are the best players in this series. Well, he was wrong about that. So why are we taking advice from Stephen A. Smith on this series? Luka has been complaining all season long. And more complaining from Luka Doncic than any season we've ever seen. And it's been a big problem. He's had more technical fouls this year than he's ever had. And this team obviously has nothing on the Boston Celtics. They can't find their way out of this hole. It keeps getting dug further and further deeper. They can't find their way out of this hole. I thought, hey, you know what? You go back to Dallas. And Kyrie Irving did have a better third game. He did. Yes. He played very well. He had 30 points. He did what he was expected to do, as we expected him to have a better game. Luka Doncic fouls out in game number 3 because he doesn't shut up. And the referees are not going to give him a break. Carmelo Anthony, you remember him? Carmelo Anthony's one of the best players, one of the best offensive players in his prime. He could never get over the hump, especially in the playoffs. Why? Because the referees didn't like him. Every time he would go up to draw a foul, he wouldn't get one. The referees didn't want to hear him complain. Then they started giving him technicals and flagrants. This has gone on long enough. James Harden, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving over the years. Everybody complains. The NBA needs to fix this. The Mavericks telling Luka to stop complaining. Do you think Luka Doncic is going to listen to anybody a part of that organization when he's the superstar? Would you listen to the organization What the organization hasn't given you enough weapons. The only reason why Dallas is where they are today is because of Luka Doncic.
I wouldn't listen to Mark Cuban, that's for sure.
And Brian Windhorst. And I read a lot of his stuff. He's a good writer. He really is. ESPN has a very, very good writers. He's one of the better ones. One of the better basketball writers. For him to come out and say, Luka to stop complaining. How about all the other players that have been complaining for years? Steph Curry being one of them. He's been complaining for years, but never gets his fingers pointed at him. Never. Because it's Luka Doncic, because Dallas right now is just getting their butts whipped. There has to be a story. There has to be something being brought up where the reason to point the fingers on why Dallas isn't playing well. They can't find a way to beat this Boston Celtic team. How about it's just depth? Boston's just that much better than they are. I never thought that. I had Dallas winning in 6 games. I did not think that the Boston Celtics were this good. Now, obviously, they had the best record in the Eastern Conference this year and throughout the league. They had I think they were 64 wins. Yep. They had the most wins. But over the years in the playoffs, they've fallen apart. Look what happened last year in the Eastern Conference Finals. Jason Tatum, they went to a Game 7. What happens? Jimmy Butler time. Jason Tatum could not hit those shots, what he needed to hit in game number 7. And then he got hurt, by the way. Jason Tatum got hurt in game number 7, and it wasn't the same. By the way, Jason Tatum in the Eastern Conference Finals last year in game 5 and game 6 actually played very well and helped them get to a game 7 because it looked like it was completely the series was completely done.
Yeah, they're down 3-0, almost came back down. They tied it up and almost came back. They were winning, I think, before Tatum got hurt.
But as soon as Tatum got hurt, they depended more on a guy like Jaylen Brown and other guys, and they just couldn't get over the hump. But for years, Jason Tatum he couldn't show up in the playoffs or there's series that he didn't show up to.
He was better as a younger player.
He would show up in one series and not show up in the next. This has been a problem with Jason Tatum over the years. Has he shown up in this series? I would say no. That doesn't mean that Jason Tatum isn't playing well, not at his high points, but Jason Tatum's played decent. I mean, he's averaging what? At 20 points in this series, 21 points. But a guy like Jason Tatum who wants $500 million at the end of the season, he should be averaging 30 like Luka. He should be averaging close to 25, 30 over the last couple of weeks. And he hasn't. He hasn't played at the top of his game throughout these playoffs.